A dire warning from the New England countryside in 1775 is now part of the American experience. But a little known midnight ride from a 16-year-old girl through eastern North Carolina is now coming to light in this edition of History Through the Lens. British are coming. How many times have we heard those words in our history classes in school when we were growing up? Well, Paul Revere didn't actually say those words. They were attributed to a very famous poem, but he did make that famous ride in 1775 through the countryside of New England, warning patriots that the British were definitely coming. And someone else did the same thing on the Outer Banks that same year on a cold December night. We're going to talk about the ride of Betsy Dowdy and her legendary ride. Joining me now is historian Barbara Snowden from Currituck County. Thank you for joining us today on this edition of History Through the Lens. And man, this is a great story. We're talking about a 16-year-old girl who engages in a midnight ride to warn the Patriots that the British were coming from a different angle. Can you just tell us, first off, who was Betsy Dowdy? Who was she as a person?
Well, we know that she was a young lady that was living on the Outer Banks. Her father was a wrecker, we think. We have to call her a legend because we don't have the historical documents to document her life. She probably lived a pretty hard life on the Outer Banks. They raised cattle, they raised ponies, bank ponies, and Black Bess, which is what we think Betsy Dowdy's horse was called, was her favorite. And she actually, what happened was on the Outer Banks, they were talking about what was going on in Great Bridge, and they were also talking about the British. And that part we can prove. The British raided the Outer Banks looking for cattle, capturing them, supplies. One of the interesting things in the British records at this particular time talk about the cattle swimming from island to island. So the British were chasing these cattle who had the ability to go from island to island. And Betsy, being a person who lived there and had her horse, would know how to go to island to island to island. And then when she heard that the British were coming to Great Bridge to attack the bridge there, she wanted to tell General Skinner. Now, General Skinner lived in Hertford, which is about 3 or 4 counties over. You have Currituck, Camden, Pasquotank, and Paquemmons today. In the 1770s, it would have been Currituck, Pasquotank, then Paquemmons. And General Skinner was in charge of the local militia. And Betsy Dowdy, at night, when she realized that nobody else was going to do this, got on her pony and rode across Currituck Sound, coming out at a place called Church's Island. And then she went from Church's Island across to what today is Camden. Lamb's Ferry was there. She woke Mr. Lamb up. He took her across the river.
Had to wade through there, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Then she went all the way to Paquemmons, to General Skinner's house. We believe that she got there about in the morning. General Skinner had 3 daughters. And so after she'd done a ride, she stayed with the daughters then and told General Skinner what was happening. General Skinner called out the militia. We do know that North Carolina troops were very, very active in the Battle of Great Bridge. So General Skinner got them organized and they marched to Great Bridge. Betsy got back on her horse, came home. Well, the interesting things in trying to prove a legend A legend is something that everybody believes really happened, but you don't have the primary sources and documents. As a historian, they want you to have 3 primary sources for everything you say, and we don't have those kind of documents. But Betsy Dowdy then came back home. General Skinner went to the Battle of Great Bridge. This whole area of northeastern North Carolina is made up of about 17 different counties. And to try to prove the legend of Betsy Dowdy and the involvement of North Carolina's troops in the battle, I looked at the pension records. Pension records, they started giving pensions for the American Revolution in 1800. Of the 17 counties, I was able to find at least 3 or 4 soldiers from every county that claimed a pension because he was at the Battle of Great Bridge. Now think about this. This is 1800. And a lot of these men were killed in fighting, but yet every county in northeastern North Carolina has soldiers who made it to the Battle of Great Bridge. And for northeastern North Carolina, that is our closest major battle. Only lasted about 30 minutes, but it stopped Lord Dunsmore, which y'all should be very familiar with, since he's the one who's going to burn down your, well,
Norfolk,
I better correct that. According to the British, the Patriots are the ones who burned down Norfolk.
It's a complicated story.
The others believe that Lord Dunsmore burned the county of Norfolk down, but he was trying to get connections to the Chesapeake Bay, and with Great Bridge being the point that goods came into Great Bridge, and both ways, coming down into North Carolina or going up into Norfolk and Virginia. If he could have had captured that area, the whole Chesapeake Bay would have been open, and all of northeastern North Carolina and further on down could very easily, at that one point, have been captured by the British, and that would make a completely different change in our history. But getting back to Betsy Dowdy.
Hold that thought, because we're going to take a very quick break, and we're going to talk about Betsy more in depth, and especially I'd like to compare her ride with Paul Revere's ride in April of that same year. More History Through the Lens coming up after this. Welcome back to this edition of History Through the Lens. I'm Tom Shadd, and we're talking about the legend of Betsy Dowdy, who engaged in a daring midnight ride on the Outer Banks, or from the Outer Banks, from Corolla to Hertford, to warn that, yes, the British were coming, and they did, and the rebels were ready for them. Joining me to talk about this is someone who's researching the life of Betsy Dowdy, and she is Barbara Snowden, historian in Currituck County. Thank you for joining us again, Barbara. And let's talk about Betsy. And I guess first off, I know you have some more documents you've been looking at to try to verify this really happened. A very challenging quest for any historian when you're trying to go from legend to history.
Yes, it is. It's very difficult to do that, especially when you have to use 18th century records. The one record that we do have, well, let's be honest. General Skinner went to the Battle of Great Bridge, so why did he know to go if Betsy did not tell him? The legend has been in Currituck County for many, many years. It has been in Hertford, and it first showed up in print in something called Grandfather Tales. And it was printed in 1901. And the person who wrote that book is a man by the name of Richard B. Creasy. And he just happened to be the grandson of one of those daughters of General Skinner.
Oh, wow.
So that means if you're telling a family story, you're going to try to get it right. So he would have been the great-great-grandson of General Skinner. And he printed it, as I said, in 1901. Now, the book that really got everybody interested in Betsy Dowdy was Betsy Dowdy's Ride by Nell Wechter Wise, which came out in the 60s. And today we have books that we're giving to school children. There's an elementary version, there's a middle school version, and so that the story is well told.
Love that.
Now, how we're going to document it.
Right.
What do we know about Paul Revere? Paul Revere was sent out to tell the soldiers that the British were coming.
Mm-hmm.
He was one of, I believe it was 2 or 3 men who set out from Boston to go up.
Charlestown to Concord.
In the process, he was captured and brought back to Boston. So I liked, when I'm talking about Betsy Dowdy and everybody mentions Paul Revere, I said, well, Betsy Dowdy succeeded, Paul Revere didn't. Now, of the 3, one of the men did get through and did warn them that the British were coming up in Massachusetts. So I can't say that for all of them, but everybody knows Paul Revere, and he didn't succeed.
The mission itself, though, was a success, you could say.
The mission itself was a success. Okay, so I know that there is a young lady somewhere in the documents. What we have found is one will that has a father giving a bed to an Elizabeth Dowdy. She's living in the right place and she's at the right age. That's the only primary document that we can prove. But what happens to women? They get married.
Mm-hmm.
And they lose their maiden name.
Right.
And so trying to find an Elizabeth Dowdy is very hard when there are a lot of Dowdys and there are a lot of Elizabeths. So we're still looking.
But you have that connection, though, from the daughters that you cited in the book that actually met Dowdy, Betsy Dowdy.
I think that's the strongest, the fact that it was a family tale that he is writing in Grandfather Tales. And he would know the story, and she would know, his grandmother would know the story, the details. And so that's why we think that is a very good indication that it is absolutely true. And there's some other funny things you can look at. On Knott's Island, which is directly across from the Outer Banks, there's a place called Betsy's Marsh. Now, think about all the places in this area that are named after heroes or named after people who did extraordinary things. How many of those are named after women?
Not many.
Not very many.
Not especially in the 18th century, right.
But there is a Betsy's Marsh that dates back to that 18th century.
Wow.
So that is one thing, again, another example. And the story of Betsy Dowdy didn't just stay in Currituck. It stayed in Currituck and in Paquemmons County. And one of the things that we're doing right now are trying to connect some of the dots to see if there may be a letter or there may be a statement or something in either one of these areas, primary sources that would, all it needs would have to say, Betsy's came to General Center's house, told us the British were coming, and then we would have a certified person.
And that's what you need.
That's what we're looking. I'm not the only one. The Dowdy family is looking. I have friends who are genealogists who are looking. People who are just interested in history are looking because it's such a good story.
Oh, it's a great story.
I mean, this young lady riding across Currituck Sound. Now, she's not the only one who has crossed Currituck Sound. We had a real big to-do back in the 1970s, I believe, or it must have been the 80s, when Gravedigger crossed Currituck Sound. Can Gravedigger get across the Sound? Well, everybody was doubting, can he, in a motor-driven car, can he get across? But Betsy Dowdy did it on a horse.
On a horse, 200 years earlier.
And she made it, we think, Again, I have to add that. We think she left from the area of Kerala. She drove, the horse was used to swimming in the Sound.
Right,
Um,
sure.
Going to the Narrows, which is a very narrow part of Currituck Sound, which is also very shallow, and then making just a little V and heading to Churches Island. And from Churches Island, she would head toward, as I said, Lamb's Ferry into what was then called Reading, which now is Elizabeth City. She would have to cross another river. She'd have to cross the Pasquotank, the Clemens, and getting to General Skinner.
I'm just taken by we're getting a warning now for time. These segments go so quickly on this, especially when you're telling a great story. Barbara, let's take another quick break and come back, and I want to talk more about Betsy Dowdy and what kind of a girl she was exactly in this edition of History Through the Lens. We'll be right back. Welcome back to this edition of History Through the Lens. I'm Tom Shadd, looking at the legend of Betsy Dowdy, that midnight ride on the Outer Banks in 1775 that led to the rebels ready for the British at the Battle of Great Bridge. And if you know anything about the American Revolution, you know the rebels won that battle rather, quickly and decisively over British forces. And getting back now with our historian, Barbara Snowden from Currituck County, Betsy Dowdy, we're still learning more about her. You're trying to verify by historical records that this ride did happen in early December at midnight on that cold night, 50 miles. What kind of a girl does this? I mean, I'm thinking 1775, she's 16. You were saying earlier, no one else was going to do this, so I'm going to do this. I mean, can you get any kind of character portrait of who she was, who Betsy Dowdy was as a girl?
Well, it's all imagination, and we're not even sure she was 16. We just know that she was a young lady. She could have been as young as 13 or on, but we do know one thing. She had a special relationship with her horse. Now think of young ladies and their horses in this day and time. Yeah. I grew up with my horse Lightning, and I know that is a special relationship. She had to know that her horse, Betsy, Black Bets, could make it across the Sound. She must have played in the Sound with him and letting him swim and her on her back. Think about the idea of ladies had to wear dresses, petticoats. Some of them, when they were dressed, would have stays on them. I don't think she probably did that ride with a stay. I think she probably left that at home. But she had to a dress. She had to have a cloak. She had to have gloves, because this is December.
Right.
And she's going to be wet. So she has to be a very resourceful young lady. Mm-hmm. She also has to be one who knows how to get through to people. Knock on Mr. Lamb's door and say, Mr. Lamb, can you ferry me across this river in the middle of the night? How many men are going to say, okay, I'll take you across? She had to be a convincing young lady. Mm-hmm. And she had to know that her purpose was important, that she had a mission and she wanted to do it. I talked about the books. I have a little thing that I do. This is an elementary book on the Betsy Dowdy's ride.
When that red cape.
And when a new young lady comes into Currituck County, that's my gift to them. And I write on the introductory page, "Welcome to Currituck Girl Power."
Well, you can't argue with that. Here is a young lady who hopped on a horse at midnight on a cold December night to ride 50 miles to try to convince people who are probably not going to believe her that British forces were coming in here. You guys better do something. And you raised another good point. Why would the general believe her? being a young girl from Kerala?
Well, I think the reason he would believe her is because there were rumors all around that Lord Dunsmore was going to try to take Great Bridge. There had been some of the militia, the Camden militia under General Isaac Gregory, had already been sent out below Great Bridge to make a, I don't know what the military people would call it, but to be a backup in case he got through there. There were rumors. There had been a battle at Kemp's Landing, which is now near Pungo, between the Patriots and Lord Dunsmore's troops. So he was in the area and he was moving around and he was setting things up. And so the reason I'm sure that General Skinner believed him was that he knew that he was going to have to face Lord Dunsmore sometime if he moved out of his area. And when I'm shopping, I go into Norfolk or Chesapeake. We're not that far from you. And so knowing that Lord Dunsmore was working in that area, General Skinner had to be preparing and thinking about, okay. And also there is another group of militia from North Carolina, from Halifax, that had heard about this, and they started moving toward Great Bridge. And there was something called the Edenton militia that had started getting together. So we all know the times that we live in. And these people knew the times that they lived in. And they knew that things were going on and that there were big things happening.
And I got this warning from this teenager, I better listen to her. And I guess the conversation must have been persuasive.
Yes.
She must have really known what she was talking about.
And the fact that all the things that had happened in Great Bridge, in New England, because this was right after Lexington and Concord. They had already started fighting. And so why would we not think that it would come down to us?
And I guess we lived in a 3-mile-per-hour world in those days. We didn't have texts, we didn't have television, radio. I mean, everything was letters and word of mouth.
Word of mouth.
Yeah, and that's where Betsy comes in. What is her legacy now to the American Revolution, to women, and to the Outer Banks?
I think her legacy is that if you want something done, you do it.
Do it yourself.
And one person can make a difference. And the legacy of to the Outer Banks and northeastern North Carolina is sometimes we feel like that we're forgotten in this little corner by ourselves, but we have a history that is rich, a history that goes back to the very beginning. Knott's Island was settled 60 years after Jamestown. All of these farms were already organized. They were trading goods. They were growing things. We were part of the economy, and we were part of the bigger picture. And sometimes we may forget that.
That's a great place to end this conversation. That was a wonderful story, the legend of Betsy Dowdy. And just before we go, I mean, how long have you been researching this, and how close are you to getting the proof you need for history?
I have been looking for this for 40 or 50 years, but I'm not the first person. There was a librarian at the Currituck County Library who put down every fact that she could have found on Betsy Dowdy and published it in one of our local history books. So we've been looking at this for a long, long time because it's something we can be very proud of.
Absolutely.
And you asked me what this means to young ladies. I think the fact that a young lady took action and made a difference.
She certainly did. And with that, thank you, Barbara Snowden. This edition of History Through the Lens, an incredible story, the legend of Betsy Dowdy and her daring midnight ride in northeastern North Carolina that led to a decisive victory for rebel forces against the British during the American Revolution, but days later. I'm Tom Shad, and remember, we make history every day.